I have another question for those of you while we're sitting here. Right now, where you live, are mosquitoes active? So for me, in Maryland, they are no longer active because we have had our first frost. And not that they all die off with the first frost, but certainly it reduces the potential for having these critters about that can bite us. All right, so in South Dakota, you're having snow. All right. And in North Carolina, where Laura is, they still have active mosquitoes. That's one of the really fun things about this webinar, and the fact that we're coming from so many different places, not just different states, but also different countries all around the world. It's really neat because things are so different, just depending on location. Kind of neat. Okay, and New Jersey no longer active either. Yep. Not a complaint. Okay, so in Nigeria, yep, that makes sense that things would be very different over there. And approaching, what is harmattan season, Femi?
It actually means the dry season in Nigeria, where we have little or no rainfall.
And for how long does that happen?
We are going to experience that till March next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you have the dry season, do you find that you have more mosquitoes biting people, less mosquitoes, or do you find that it makes a difference?
Yeah, during the dry season, we have much more mosquitoes because the temperature will be extremely high. And during that period, mosquitoes has much flying capacity, and the eggs has the probability of surviving much more than during the rainy season.
That makes a lot of sense. I just had to turn a light on here so I don't have such a glare in the background. I know that I was fascinated to find out that during time periods of drought, people often get bitten more by mosquitoes for a couple reasons. One is that sometimes there are fewer animals for the mosquitoes to bite because, of course, mosquitoes like to bite. They like to bite mammals and suck their blood as well. The other reason was that people often will leave containers out to capture whatever water they're able to, and that encourages mosquitoes breeding. Neat stuff. And we'll get going in about 9 minutes. And while folks are joining us tonight, it is wonderful to have you here. We would love to see where you're joining us from. In the chat box, perhaps you could write where you're joining us from, and you can take a look, and see where our other participants are joining us from. And hello there, Sophie from Texas. I like it that yours pops up and tells us where you're from even. That's wonderful. Nice to have you with us. And Dallas, Texas. Okay. So Sophie, in Dallas, Texas, are mosquitoes still active? We've noticed in South Dakota that it's snowing, so they're no longer active there. And here in Maryland, we've had our first frost, so we're not experiencing them. So you say a little bit. Okay. Mm-hmm. And in Nigeria, where Femi is, they're very active and only going to get more active because they're entering dry season now. Fascinating. And Bailey's from Flat Rock, Michigan. Fantastic. Bailey, nice to have you on tonight. Thank you so much. Bailey is one of the middle school students whom I'm mentoring this year while she is working with the Mission Mosquito and using that for her and a couple of other students that she works with for their project. So we're going to tell you a little bit about that a little later in our webcast. All right. Yep. That sounds right. We kind of say like there's active season and then there is, inactive season. Apparently, and this was something I hadn't realized, mosquitoes, well, I knew they're pretty crafty buggers, but they are able to find places where they can overwinter. So here in the Washington, D.C. area, apparently they have been able to overwinter, so continue to stay alive down in the subway, down in our metro system, because I guess there they've got water and it's warm enough. So not a good thing, but kind of fascinating that they're able to do that. All right, and we have Dr. Mike Wimberly joining us this evening from Oklahoma. Mike, do you still have active mosquitoes in Oklahoma?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Hi there.
Well, I have figured out how to unmute my microphone. Not many. There are like a few still buzzing around, but they're pretty much done for the season at this point. We'll probably have our first frost, actually, if not tonight, tomorrow night. And so most of them are probably already, the ones that overwinter are underground in Diapause already. So yeah, it's nicely mosquito free.
I completely agree. We had such a intense mosquito summer here in the DC area, partly because it was warmer than usual and we had a lot more precipitation than we usually do. And I couldn't wait for the first frost because I was so just fed up with every time we went, even just outside on my porch, practically eaten alive. So yes, it is a good feeling to have that. Mike, I'm wondering, can you explain what it means, since we have you here, for the mosquitoes to enter diapause? Is that what you called it?
Right. I mean, effectively, that's hibernation. So it's triggered by, when they go into diapause, and it varies by species, it's triggered by partly by the amount of daylight and partly by temperature. So they will basically, they're genetically programmed to find a place, typically they want to go underground into a place like the metro, or, out here in the plains, they might go into something like an animal burrow. Because basically, if they can get underground, even if it's just, a few feet under the soil, the air temperature variability, they don't suffer quite that much variability in temperature, and they can basically, hang out, slowing down all of their body processes throughout the winter until the temperature comes up again, and at least some of them will survive and emerge.
That's fascinating. That's really, really interesting. And if they are not experiencing diapause, about what is their life cycle?
Their lifespan?
Yeah, their lifespan. That's what, of course, what I meant.
Yeah, that varies considerably, and to my knowledge, that's one of the least understood aspects of mosquito population dynamics, because it's tricky to follow. We can't radio collar mosquitoes like we can larger organisms. But again, depending on the species and depending on the environmental conditions, it can be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months.
Fascinating. And that's also neat, Mike, that you say that, you know, some of these things we just don't have the answers for. Things like that we think, oh, there must be, oh, it's 2 weeks and, you know, 3 days and 1 hour, that it turns out that actually, guess what? You know, there's a lot of variability and we don't exactly know.
Yes.
One more quick question while we have you, and then we'll get started. We've had a question asking, do mosquitoes sleep?
That is a good question. I mean, I'm not a mosquito physiologist. I mean, they do spend the majority of their time resting. So, you know, we tend to encounter mosquitoes when they're doing annoying things like looking for blood meals and they're biting us. But like a lot of animals, you know, most of their time they're just resting and hanging out. And that's typically, you know, again, depending on the species, that is in vegetation, or it could be in the eaves of a house, somewhere where there's often some thermal buffering and they're protected from wind and predators. So, you know, I don't think they're sleeping in the same way that we do, but, you know, my guess would be, you know, they go into some type of state where they're slowing down their body processes and not consuming as much energy when they're resting. But yeah, these are good questions.
Let's stump the mosquito expert. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Well, I think we will go ahead and get started because we have a tendency to run late, and we hate to do that, especially when we're already starting so late for many of us, especially for Femi in Africa. Where Femi is in Nigeria right now, it is 2 o'clock in the morning. So he's definitely taken one for the team. All right, I'm going to stop my video so that I'm not distracted by watching myself, and to help so that I don't have to worry so much about the problems with bandwidth. All right, so we have, I think, a really exciting program for you this evening. I'm going to start off giving us a little bit of information about what NASA Earth-observing satellites are and what their relationship is to the GLOBE protocols, and also explaining how it is that we are able to use some of our NASA Earth-observing satellite data to be able to predict, monitor, and even respond to mosquito-borne disease outbreaks. So I happen to work at Goddard Space Flight Center. I was a teacher for over 30 years and loved it. And now I support a satellite mission that focuses on measuring precipitation. So that's kind of my claim to being able to give us some information about these NASA Earth observing satellites. And I'll give you a little more information about Mike Wimberly when he's ready to present. But Mike is coming to us from Oklahoma State University of Oklahoma, and he is a scientist who is using NASA Earth observing satellite data in addition to other data to be able to develop a predictive model for West Nile virus in the United States. He also does a lot of other research. He also works with malaria in the highlands of Ethiopia and has a lot of other research he does as well. But tonight we're going to be focusing on the model that he's developed for predicting West Nile virus in the United States. Then we're having Mr. Getting Science Done, Jeff Bauman, a fabulous GLOBE teacher out in Michigan, who's going to be telling us how he organizes his students for conducting mission mosquito science fair investigations. I'm going to give a little bit of information when he's done about some of the work I'm doing with 4 of his students. I'm mentoring them. And then Cassie is going to show us some of the tools that we can be using to be able to just have this wide variety of materials that are available to you, and discussion boards, collaborative places, just kind of going through and showing you where you can find those. So next slide, please. Okay, so right now, this is the latest picture that we have showing us showing us the satellites that NASA supports that are collecting what we call Earth observations. So Earth observing satellites are just a part of NASA's Earth observations. We also do ground observations, and we do airborne observations, But when we're talking about these satellites, other than the International Space Station, which is on here and does have instruments that are monitoring data on Earth, the rest of the satellites are unmanned satellites. They're in orbit around Earth and they're collecting data. Now, some of these Earth-observing satellites might just be focusing on one parameter. The satellite mission that I support, Global Precipitation Measurement Mission, is simply, well, not simply, it's pretty complicated, but it's measuring how much it rains and snows all over the globe. And the SMAP mission is measuring soil moisture. But then there's some other satellites that, for example, ARA, that's studying atmospheric chemistry and dynamics. It's looking at things like ozone and air quality, looking at the specific types of pollution, such as nitrogen dioxide. So the really neat thing about these satellites is they have different instruments on board that they're using to collect this data. Now, we call this remote sensing, and we do ground validation to make sure that these algorithms that we've created, these ways of gathering data remotely when we're not even down there, we have ways of making sure that what we're measuring is actually is accurate. And it takes an awful lot of math and a lot of fabulous engineering. And if you want to learn more about these different missions, what you do is you simply put the name of the mission, like let's say GPM, in a Google search and put in GPM and NASA, and you will learn all kinds of neat information about these satellites. All right, next slide, please. Here you're going to see a short video that explains why NASA studies Earth. So I'll go ahead and let Cassie play that. It may be that we're not going to get the sound, though. And if that happens,
why does NASA as a space agency study Earth? Because it's a planet too. And there are a lot of advantages to monitoring the only home we currently have, from space. Just 3 years after the space age began, NASA launched the first satellite to monitor Earth's weather. It was the beginning of a revolution in weather forecasting and laid the foundation for the global study of Earth. Today, NASA's fleet of Earth-observing satellites is essential to helping us understand how our planet works. We're trying to answer some very big questions. How is Earth changing? What's causing these changes? And what does the future hold? The answers are critical to human life and civilization as we know it. Adding to what we learned from satellites, NASA also makes regional observations from airplanes and ships. Our scientists collect even more data on the ground, and others use computers to model what's happening now and in the future for the land, ocean, and atmosphere. Altogether, it's called Earth System Science, and NASA is a global leader in the field. Best of all, NASA shares what it learns with researchers and agencies throughout the world. Because when it comes to understanding Earth, space is the place to really know a planet. And that's exactly where NASA is.
Well, that's just kind of a teaser to give us a little bit of understanding how and why NASA is able to study Earth from space. And if we can have the next slide, please. So, of course, we're not able to see mosquitoes from space. We're awesome and can do some amazing things, but we can't quite do that. But what we can do is we're able to measure these different environmental parameters, such as precipitation. Next, hit the little hard one, I can't. Good. Soil moisture. Next one. Land cover and surface temperature and relative humidity. These are all things that we're able to measure using our satellites. And when you take this data and you use other data as well, and Mike Wimberly will be giving us an example of ways in which that is done, it's very, very useful for being able to predict where and when you're going to have mosquitoes being active. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of different variables that impact mosquitoes. And not only that, there are a lot of different types of mosquitoes. It turns out there are over 3,500 species of mosquitoes worldwide, and different species prefer different types of environmental parameters and are found in different regions. And we're going to be covering a lot more about the types of mosquitoes in other webinars. There's an absolutely fabulous resource that Dr. Rusty Lowe has created, and it's called Know Your Mosquitoes, Comparing Globe Observer Mosquito Habitat Mapper Taxa, and it helps you to understand some of the different places where you'll find some of the mosquitoes that we're kind of most concerned about, like Aedes aegypti, Aedes albopictus, Culex, and Anopheles. And it also tells us the different types of diseases that can be transmitted from those mosquitoes, where they're likely to lay their eggs, and gives us a lot of other neat information about the mosquitoes as well. So that's one of the things that I'll, from time to time, I will let you know about, are some of the different resources that have been developed to make your job easier and to also help you as you kind of embark on this really neat, fascinating enterprise of trying to better understand these mosquitoes and the ways in which they're able to impact us. Next slide, please. So in order to understand how and why we can use some of these NASA data, it's important to know that mosquitoes actually go through a life cycle, because that helps us to understand why we can use these data on precipitation and temperature and vegetation. Why do they have an impact on on mosquitoes? So I like to kind of start with the adult mosquito. So if you look at the flying mosquito over there, there we have our adult mosquito, and it turns out that only the female mosquitoes are the ones that are biting us. And the reason they're biting us is because they have eggs, and they want to give their eggs a blood meal. They're good moms. They want to give their eggs a blood meal so that the eggs then are viable. They can hatch. Once they get this blood meal, and they get it by biting us or by biting mammals, then they'll lay their eggs somewhere where there is some water, preferably some still water. One of the things that Dr. Lowe has suggested that people might want to try to investigate is, do mosquitoes seem to prefer different types of water? So we'll explain to you a little later during another webinar some of the ways in which you can make larval traps, and you can try different types of water to see if mosquitoes happen to prefer one type of water over another. So then the mosquitoes, once they find their water, and they really like to find this still water that's just kind of sitting somewhere that's not going to be disturbed, but it also is near some vegetation, because once the adult mosquito lays her egg, she needs to go and rest. So that's where we tie in. The precipitation is what is filling either the puddles or maybe the old empty tires that are sitting there, the dishes that are left out or the buckets in the yard for the dogs to have water. All those are places that when it rains, then we have some water there that the mosquitoes would like to have to lay their eggs. We already talked a little bit in the chat window when we were first starting here about the temperatures and how the temperature has an impact on whether or not mosquitoes are going to be active, or whether they're going to go into that diapause stage that Mike was telling us about, the few that are able to find a place to kind of overwinter. So we see the temperature is important, the precipitation is important, humidity is important to them as well as soil moisture is, and then also that vegetation. So then we have the larval stage. That's the stage at which we're going to be able to try to identify the species of mosquitoes that you have, because the neat thing is, while they're larvae, they cannot bite you, they cannot transmit diseases, and so that's why we're going to be using the larva. And we'll be having an entire webinar helping you understand how you can identify the species of larva based on some really neat physical characteristics. Then it goes and it becomes a pupa, which is this kind of strange looking, it looks to me like a little Disney creature. And it's a pupa for a very, very short period of time, and then out comes the adult. So that's kind of a neat thing to know as well, that mosquitoes go through this life cycle. Next slide, please. And then Cassie, if you'll push this one actually has a little bit of an animation here. There's no music or anything or no talking, but this is just showing us with the mosquito that transmits Zika, which is Aedes and mainly Aedes aegypti. In this case, this researcher, Monahan, was looking at precipitation, humidity, and surface temperature to make a predictive model of where and when there might be an abundance of this type of mosquito that can transmit Zika. The next slide, please. So the basic science questions that we're hoping to answer, not that we're hoping, we know we're going to be able to answer, but we're going to need your help. There's 3 science questions that we're going to focus on. We want to get a feel for the baseline of the range and distribution of, say, Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus. So you will be helping us when you have active mosquito season and you have larvae, you will be able to identify the types of larvae that you have and let us know, are you finding Aedes aegypti, Aedes albopictus? We also want to get a better feel for the seasonality of local mosquito vectors. So that vectors simply means that it's mosquitoes, they're the vectors, they're the ones that transmit the disease to us. So we want to know, when are you first seeing mosquitoes? When is the last time that you're seeing the mosquitoes? And when is your period of your greatest number of observations? And finally, we want to be able to quantify change in mosquito frequency and distribution to your local, like your school level, your regional, your national, and even global scales. And get an understanding of some of the environmental parameters like precipitation, land cover, surface temperature, and soil moisture. I hope those of you who are globe teachers are saying, whoa, wait a minute, we collect that data. We collect that data all the time. So hopefully you're feeling like you are already empowered to be able to help us with this research. Next slide, please. During active season, we are anticipating that you can use the Mosquito Habitat Mapper and do all 4 steps that are involved in the Mosquito Habitat Mapper. At the same time, you can be collecting other globe data, and all this is written on our website. And we will also have these resources available to you, so you don't have to have this memorized. But all of those are different protocols that you could be using to help you conduct your research. And next slide, please. And don't think that if you don't have active mosquito season, you're off the hook. Nothing could be further from the case. Because during non-active season, you can be learning about what types of mosquito-transmitted diseases are in your location. You can weekly be going around with the Mosquito Habitat Mapper and identifying potential mosquito breeding habitats and eliminating them, so that you get in the habit of doing that when you can. Do monthly land cover data observations, collect air temperature, precipitation data, see what it was like over the past several years, and then predict when you think active season is going to be in your location. You can lead a school-wide prevention campaign before active season begins and be prepared to do what scientists do, and that is multi-year investigations. You start off with your investigation where you're predicting when you're going to start to see mosquitoes being active, and then continue to collect your data even after the April 10th science fair deadline. You've turned your project in if you're doing the Globe IVSS or another Globe Science Fair. You've turned your data in, and now you're continuing, though, to collect data to find out when those mosquitoes are active. You're identifying the type of larva, and you then have your second year of your investigation ready to go. So that's what I wanted to tell you about from my end today. And next, what I'm going to do is introduce to you Dr. Mike Wimberly, who is a professor at the Department of Geography and Environmental Sustainability at the University of Oklahoma. His research explores patterns and drivers of land use and land cover dynamics, the ecological impacts of changing climates and landscapes, and the implications of these changes for ecosystem services and human health. So without further ado, Mike, I'm going to mute myself and it's all yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
You sound great, Mike. Thank you.
Okay, let's just go on to the first slide. So just a kind of fun introduction here. I don't know how many people recognize the artist of this little warning pamphlet, but this was actually written by Dr. Seuss when he was employed by the Army during the Second World War. And before he got into children's books, he was into drawing pictures of mosquitoes, among other things. But you know, kind of a fun connection for those of you who are familiar with Dr. Seuss. And I think it provides some context on how big and how long the challenge of mosquito-borne diseases has been around. You know, so in the context of World War II, this was a huge issue of national security because we had a lot of soldiers in tropical areas who were exposed to the mosquitoes that transmit malaria. Go on to the next slide, please. But I'm going to talk about a different disease, and this is West Nile virus. And West Nile virus is, you know, it often doesn't get as much attention as newer concerns like Zika, but it is the most prevalent mosquito-borne disease in the United States. It's been around for almost 20 years now, and it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. And so this is what's called an arbovirus, a mosquito-transmitted virus. And the primary zoonotic hosts are birds. So it's really a bird disease. And for the most part, mosquitoes transmit the disease from one bird to another. And that's how it sticks around in the environment. However, it's possible for mosquitoes to be infected by a bird and transmit the disease to other organisms like humans or horses. Humans, we get the disease, but unlike other diseases like malaria or Zika or dengue, we're not suitable hosts to retransmit it. So we're what's called a dead-end host. And most of the time, if you get West Nile virus, you know, you may have no symptoms or just kind of feel like you have a mild flu. You know, in about 2/3 of reported cases, it can cause a severe fever with symptoms kind of like a severe flu. And about 1/3 of reported cases, it can have severe effects. It gets into the brain. It can cause muscle weakness, vision loss, paralysis. And if you get the severe form of it, there's a 10% mortality rate, with older individuals and people with pre-existing conditions being the most susceptible. So it is remains a real problem in certain parts of the US. Next slide, please. Strangely, one of the places where it's most severe is a place where I used to live, South Dakota. So if you look at the map over there, the darker areas have the highest long-term incidence of West Nile virus. So the highest number of West Nile virus cases normalized for the population. So you see there's kind of a little hotspot down there in Mississippi, Louisiana, the Mississippi River Valley, but then we have this big blob over the Great Plains of all places. And South Dakota actually has the highest long-term risk of West Nile virus in the nation. So in a state that has fewer than 1 million people, there have been almost 2,400 cases since the disease arrived in 2002, including 38 deaths, and it's more, there were 4 deaths in 2018 that aren't reported here. So we're looking at the state with the highest annual incidence and the highest annual incidence of severe disease. And what that means, if you're in South Dakota, you know, everyone knows multiple people who have had West Nile virus, or who knows someone or has a relative who's died of West Nile virus. So it's a serious issue. Next slide, please. All right, so what I've worked on with West Nile virus is forecasting. So why do we need to forecast West Nile virus? Why would this be useful? There are a couple of things going on here. One is that if we knew when and where we were likely to have a lot of disease transmission in a lot of cases, just logically that would be useful, because then we could concentrate mosquito control and other disease control and prevention efforts there. But we actually don't have that many good indicators. If we look at human cases, they're actually a lagging indicator of West Nile virus transmission. So if a person has symptoms of West Nile, they go to the doctor, a test is done, it has to be confirmed. It can take weeks or months. So we really don't know what the magnitude, the public health impact is until the end of the summer when the season's over. Mosquito control is an important partner in controlling diseases, but they tend to react mostly to public complaints. People complain about being bitten by mosquitoes. But mosquito abundance itself is actually a poor indicator of disease risk for a couple of reasons. As Dorian pointed out, not all mosquitoes are vectors that transmit a disease, and not all mosquitoes carry the disease. If you look over at the chart on the right, you see red in South Dakota. That is our main West Nile virus vector, Culex tarsalis. And if you look at it, it tends to peak in the later in the summer or in midsummer after the main peak of nuisance mosquitoes. So, we have this situation where at the time when people are sensing, hey, there aren't as many mosquitoes around, I'm not being bitten as much anymore, that's actually when the vector numbers are going up and disease risk is potentially increasing. Next slide, please. And so there are a number of things that we can do here. And one of the things that public health officials do is they do surveillance. They can put out traps with CO2 and they can catch mosquitoes. And you can actually take those mosquitoes into the lab, grind them up, test them, and see if mosquitoes have West Nile virus. And that's actually a very useful measurement to have. If you knew, hey, I found a mosquito with West Nile virus in my backyard, it would be a good indicator that there's a lot of risk. But there are some limitations here. We can't do that everywhere. It takes time and people and money to collect the mosquitoes, take them into the lab, do the preparation and testing. So what we end up with is a limited coverage of the surveillance network, and it's hard for us to interpolate and make predictions at unmeasured locations. Next slide, please. And I'll just kind of follow up on what Dorian has already talked about here. Another source of surveillance data for disease forecasting is environmental monitoring data. So from those various NASA satellites and missions that Dorian talked about, we have often global data available via remotely sensed Earth observations. Unlike the mosquito data, we've got maps. It's wall-to-wall data, high quality, relatively complete. And we have all these measurements of temperature, precipitation, vegetation dynamics, humidity, all these different things. But the limitation here is these are actually indirect metrics of the potential for disease transmission because we're looking at, we're a couple of steps removed. We're looking at environmental factors that might influence the mosquitoes and the virus. And there are other things going on, such as the movement of hosts. Viruses move around. So in the case of West Nile virus, it's typically the birds that move it around when they are looking for habitat or migrating. And we have other things that I'm not going to get into here, like community cycles, feedbacks that can either increase or decrease risk. So environmental data alone isn't enough. Next slide, please. So let me just quickly walk you through some of these environmental linkages. So if you look at this diagram, we've got at the top a vector mosquito that can become infected by this arbovirus, West Nile virus. It is primarily maintaining the virus by transmitting it from one bird to another. And both those mosquitoes and the birds are sensitive to various habitats, including breeding habitat for the mosquitoes as well as various habitats for the birds. All right, hit the button once there for me. And as I mentioned before, we can get this spillover transmission to humans. Okay, again. All right, so let's just look at a couple of factors. Let's look at temperature on the top and precipitation on the bottom. Click, please. Mosquitoes are these tiny, I mean, basically they're cold-blooded organisms. They're tiny, they have no ability to maintain their own body temperature. So they're basically the same temperature as the air around them. And that influences all kinds of their vital rates, including how fast are they growing? How likely are they to survive or die? Are they going to be active in biting humans? Okay, click please. Temperature also influences other things inside the mosquito, like the virus itself. So the rate at which that virus develops and replicates inside the mosquito is sensitive to temperature. Again, please. We tend to overlook this, but zoonotic hosts like birds are very sensitive to heat waves and droughts. So we have impacts there again as well. And I think click once more. And then both temperature and precipitation can influence the habitat, the water balance for the aquatic breeding habitats, as well as vegetation that influences bird habitats. And I think maybe one more time. And then part of this is that all of these processes take time. So if we know something about the variability in these environmental factors, and we know something about these linkages here that are shown in this slide, if we're tracking the environmental factors, we can actually get a little bit of lead time for early warning. If we know that a heat wave is going to trigger certain responses, then that may give us days or weeks before the mosquito and the virus transmission actually responds. Next slide, please. All right, now the challenge of doing all of this, and Dorian kind of implied this, is that basically we're looking for a needle in the proverbial haystack, looking for a virus in South Dakota or in the US. Click, please. And as I pointed out before, here are a couple of different ways of getting information: the mosquito trapping and the environmental monitoring. Again, please. So the mosquito trapping gives us a really close look. We get a great look at the haystack, but only in a few places. The environmental monitoring lets us look at the whole haystack, but it's a bit of a distorted look because we're only looking at risk factors. And then finally, if we put those together, the hope is that by combining, we can get a better picture of the haystack. Next, please. So the way that we do this is to predict West Nile virus transmission in South Dakota. We have, so for 2018, we have historical data on mosquito infections, temperature, humidity, precipitation data from a NASA product called the NLDAS, the North American Land Data Assimilation System. Click, please. So what we do is we put these together and we develop a model. And we've got various steps here that I'm not going to get into, but basically we come up with a model where we're using the mosquito infection data and the environmental data to predict when and where we're going to see human West Nile virus cases. Okay, again, please. And then what we do, if we want to make a prediction in 2018, we monitor that mosquito data in 2018 in near real time. We do the same thing with the weather data. We can bring in some information on long-range weather forecasts, and we can actually make predictions a week or two ahead of time, risk maps of which counties we expect to have the most West Nile virus cases, and time series graphs of how many West Nile virus cases we're going to see over the season and when they're going to occur. Next slide, please. And so we've done this for a number of years, and it's actually worked fairly well. If you look at these graphs here, so for 2016 and 2017, the the black solid lines and the black shaded areas represent our predictions and associated confidence intervals in each of these years. The red line represents the actual cases that we observed in South Dakota, and then the dashed lines are observed cases from a couple of different years, 2012 and 2017, just to provide kind of a high year and a low year baseline. So you can see that what we were able to do is actually predict that 2016 was going to be a high year, 2017 was going to be a low year, and we were even able to predict other things. Like in 2016, you could see that transmission started much earlier than it did in 2012, that dashed black line, which was the last really big transmission year in South Dakota. So we're actually able to pick up on some of those subtleties. Next slide, please. And then this is just kind of looking at overall predictions of county weeks. You can just basically think of this as the number of West Nile virus cases. And these are models based on, over here on the left, mosquito infection data only, meteorological data, that's our NASA environmental data only in the middle, and then putting them together on the right. And what you can see is we need all the information. The infection data tells us some of the story, but not all of it. The meteorological data tells us part of the story, but not all of it. But when we put them together, we actually are able to discriminate year-to-year variability pretty well. So it's kind of like the Reese's peanut butter cup of disease forecasting. You know, we put the chocolate and the peanut butter together and we get something pretty nice out the other end. Next slide, please. And I'm just, throwing one more thing out here as an example. This is something that Andrea Hess, a graduate student of mine, has been working on. So this is looking at the problem a little bit differently, asking, can we develop a risk map and highlight, not necessarily predict when we're going to see transmission, but where? Can we highlight areas in the state that have had persistent, consistently high levels of West Nile virus cases over the past 15 years? And Andrea's been pretty successful with this. And she's got a paper in review right now, and you can kind of see her final risk map here. And the darker red highlights the areas in the state where, even though it varies from year to year, these are the places where we expect to consistently see the most West Nile virus transmission. And again, this is driven by a variety of NASA products, including spectral indices from MODIS, climatological data from the NLDAS, and some other things as well. Next slide, please. And I don't want to go too much over, so I'll just kind of wrap it up quickly and mention that another thing that we've done is that we've actually worked closely with the State Department of Health to go from this disease forecasting being something that a bunch of nerds at the university do to something that can actually be part of their West Nile virus prevention and control activities. And that includes incorporating our predictions there in red into their weekly bulletin, and also providing software and training for them to be able to keep doing forecasts when our research project is over, as all research projects must end at some point. Next, please. All right, and this is the last thing, and I would just say that kind of coming back around and making the list, the link with citizen science, which I haven't really been talking about. I guess the big lesson we learned from this is that you need a lot of different sources of information, and you need to bring them together in creative ways to be able to understand and predict mosquito-borne disease transmission. And so for people engaging in citizen science, what I see is that, this is another important source of information. It has some really great strengths, other limitations, but, I'm looking forward to bringing it to the party and, combining it with some of the other data sources that we've worked with, because I think it's going to help us improve these types of models in the future. And that's it.
Wow, Mike, thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating. And one of the things that we're really trying to achieve with our Globe Mission Mosquito campaign is this fusing together of scientists and educators, and of course students, and general citizen scientists who will hail from everywhere, but really understanding the science behind this, and then also getting a feel for, well, what can those of us who are Globe educators do to be able to learn from the scientists and to be able to assist with this research. So if we can have the next slide, please. What we're going to be doing next is hearing from Mr. Getting Science Done, Jeff Bauman. He is a 6th and 8th grade science teacher at Shumate Middle School, which is in Gibraltar, Michigan. He is also an adjunct science education and educational technology professor at the University of Michigan, which is in Dearborn. He has been a Globe teacher now for 4 years, and he must have a clone because he's also the father of 3 children, and he is always just going and getting the most amazing things accomplished. So without further ado, it is my absolute joy and pleasure to have Jeff tell us how he's getting science done with Mission Mosquito at his middle school. Take it away, Jeff.
You know, the first thing, you're not supposed to give away my secret about the clone of me.
Dude,
I wanted you to stay impressed with all that we do around here. But before I get going, tonight I got to give a couple shout outs. Mike, awesome job. That was really awesome, buddy. And then one of my students, I just looked a second ago, we have Bailey on the call. And Bailey is one of our 6th graders, and she's part of our Mission Mosquito team. And it looks like Mom and her brother's watching too. I mean, we are getting science done, whole family tonight, baby. This is great. So I am Jeff Bauman. I teach middle school science at Shumate Middle School in Gibraltar, Michigan. I am also adjunct professor here at University of Michigan, Dearborn. Didn't get to go home yet. I'm still on campus, and I can't wait to share what we're doing. So next slide, please. There we go. All right. If you want to see the work that we do at Shumate, here is our Facebook page, Shumate Science. I'm not sure why you haven't liked it already, but you might want to do that now if you want to see the cool Globe advisory stuff we're doing. My contact information is on there. There's my email. And if you want to look me up on Twitter, that's there as well. I love sharing what we're doing and telling the awesome stories about the cool science that our students are doing as well. So check that out if you want to see how we do things in Downriver, Michigan and Gibraltar. Next slide, please. This is Shumate and Carlson. We are a combined building, a middle school and a high school on one campus. And this is a picture that my students took with the Aaron project that I'm working on with Mr. David Bilowski, Andy Henry, awesome guys from Wayne Risa, and Mr. Jeff Bland from NASA as well. So we're taking aerial imaging. I know Aaron is awesome. You got it. We're taking images from kites way up high. We hope to get our kites up again soon, but this is one of our pictures of our campus. Could you give me the next slide, please? This is a picture of Shumate a little higher up, and you can kind of see the water that's around our campus. We have a wetland just to the north. We have Lake Erie just to the east, and we have some retention ponds around our campus as well. So we've been doing a lot of measurements with the retention ponds. Can I go next slide, please? And this is even higher up. So if in that red circle, that is our campus. And you can see the Detroit River, and you can see Groseal, where I live, little island off to the left there. And then we have Lake Erie, and then the US-Canada border. So long story short, we're surrounded by water. Now, over the last few years, we've been doing a lot of research on soil moisture for the SMAP satellite campaign. We've taken a lot of measurements for that. We started getting involved with integrated hydrology. My students love measuring the retention ponds. We have a couple students taking measurements by Groseal, one being my daughter, and then we have another student taking measurements in local canals in Gibraltar, close to the Shumate Middle school campus. And can I have the next slide? And we've been taking globe measurements for about 3 years, and this is our 4th year. Now, my first 3 years, I had students take measurements during science hour. I would send a group of students out using the train the trainer method, and they would take their measurements, they would come back inside, they would log the data in globe, put it up on the big data board, and then they would get back to work. This year, we are trying something new. We're doing globe during advisory time. So I work with our globe all-stars, if you will, every day for 25 minutes, right after 3rd hour. And we have 9 teams right now. We have 9 different globe studies going with our students 6th through 8th grade. And at the beginning, what we had was students signed up to work in groups of 3, and they picked different things that they wanted to investigate. So I had some students doing tree measurements for ISAT-2, some that are studying pond salinity, or the salinity in the ponds. And then what happened was we had a group of students that wanted to use the Globe Observer app. We had Bailey, we had Sophia, and we had Olivia. And they were on the Globe Observer team. And originally we were going to use the Globe Observer to measure clouds. And Dorian got a hold of me and she said, no, Jeff, you need to do mosquitoes. And I said, okay, well, it's fall, it's about to get cold here. And she said, no, Jeff, you need to do mosquitoes. And I said, well, we'll see. And then she got a hold of me again. She said, no, Jeff, you need to do mosquitoes. And so that's where the whole Mission Mosquito team started. And Dorian had a webinar with Bailey, with Olivia and Sophia, and she got a hold of them. And at first they didn't really know what to think about measuring mosquitoes, but then when she pitched her idea, the students said, oh my goodness, this is the greatest thing. We totally want to be part of this. Can I have the next slide, please? Sorry, right here, these are all the things that my students are measuring in that advisory. We have the Mission Mosquito team, which Bailey is part of. She's here. We have the plains and contrail study, the pH and dissolved oxygen study. We have students measuring precipitation around at 3 different spots on the campus. We're still measuring SMAP. That's not going to stop. I love that one. We're measuring salinity, surface temp for Dr. C and Janet down in Toledo. ISAT-2, my good friend Brian Campbell. And we are measuring hydrology at Horse Island in Gibraltar. So those are the big things that we're doing. Next slide, please. And this is what the advisory looks like. I set my advisory up in a Google Classroom. All 25 students have access to our Google Classroom. So during advisory time, we communicate, they upload data. There's links to the Globe website, different things on our Google Classroom. It works awesome. This is just, it's a really, really cool LMS, learning management system, and it's working beautifully. Can I have the next slide? In addition to the students being enrolled, one thing I did different this year is I asked a lot of my friends to come and join. And so what we had was I sent out an email to a lot of my friends that work at NASA, work for Globe, work for Ulysses, Coco Roz, Wayne Risa. And what the coolest thing is the minute I sent out the email, they couldn't wait to join the party. They couldn't wait to come and start working with our students. And it was the greatest thing, just having this support. And so you can see the list of people that jumped on board to start mentoring my students and working with them. And here's some of the comments. Dr. Butler, he goes onto the Google Classroom and he posts questions for my students, and they go in and respond. They're like, oh my goodness, we've got rock stars talking to us. And they just love it. They gobble it up. My good friend David Bidlowski here, he loves posting science questions for our students and links and things for them to look at. And just having that support goes such a long way. And you know, the coolest thing is that people from Globe and NASA, they love helping students. They can't wait to help students. Dorian could not wait to do mosquitoes with my students. So that's the way it looks. Next slide, please. Right here we have Bailey, we have Sophia, and we have Olivia. They are on my computer having a webinar with Mrs. Janney. And this is when she started pitching the idea, and obviously it wasn't that bad because you see Sophia in the middle just smiling away. She couldn't wait to do it. So what we did was Dorian pitched the idea to our students, gave them a list of homework, which I am totally cool with. You load them up with homework, that is a-okay. So they have a bunch of research they need to do. And this year they're going to be conducting research, and we're going to start taking some mosquito measurements along the way, but this year is going to focus more on mosquito, the whole problem with mosquitoes. And then we're going to try and forecast when the active season is in Michigan, and what are some of the bad health effects from mosquitoes. The girls are going to do that research. So they're doing amazing things using Chromebooks, Zoom. Another thing that I'm going to tie in a little bit later on is if you look to the left there, that is our weather station on our building, and we found a way to pull our own weather station into this study. We are using weather stations to help predict mosquitoes, and I think that kind of ties in with what Mike was saying, which is really cool how we're using local weather to kind of predict. Next slide, please. And so here, this is Dorian. She's working with the students. Not only does she talk about mosquitoes, she's got props. She likes to hold them up so the kids can see them, and she explains. They get it, So this is a picture from our end of one of our webinars. Next slide. And I have to introduce, I'm not sure if you made the webinar tonight or not, but in the middle, a young man by the name of Mohammed. When we started doing our Globe Advisory Classroom and all the measurements we were taking, I needed a team manager, and Mohammed is in one of my science classes, and he did not apply for the Globe program, and when he heard about the pure awesomeness of our program, he was totally disappointed that he did not join. And so I realized I needed a go-to team manager, so I hired Mohammed, and he's kind of gravitated toward this group, and he's working with the ladies to make sure they have everything they need to be successful with their study. So not only is he the team manager for all of the teams, but he's helping out big time with the ladies. I will say one thing. Yesterday, the students were taking measurements, and one of our hydrology teams tossed the bucket into the pond. And without thinking twice, he started walking into the pond with his nice Jordans and pants on. So we had to have a talk about that, about being a little too aggressive as Globe team manager. But that's Mohammed. He gets science done. That's why I hired the kid. So long story short, having a good team manager for a Globe thing like this is always a plus. Get a Mohammed. He's awesome. So he really helps the girls out. So anyways. Picture on the right, another example of the research that the young ladies have been doing with Mrs. Janney. So these are a list of questions and resources that she's shown them, and really helped guide them along the way. And next slide. And right here, here's an example of the homework that Mrs. Janney gives my students. Once again, I love that somebody else is giving my kids homework. I think that's great. So the team has been more than happy to do the research on these questions, go to the websites, and it's been a real eye-opener for them. And I think it's really, I think they know now how scary this mosquito thing is, and at the beginning, they weren't too sure about it, but now they're really invested in this, and it's really cool to see how that's transitioned. So this is an example of one of the things Mrs. Janney has posted on our stream. And next slide, please. I'm talking way too long. I apologize. As I said earlier, a huge part of our study is using air temp, max, min, average, precipitation, and we get that from our weather stem station. Now, our weather stem station was a grant that we received from the generous donation from Ulysses, Dr. Dixon Butler, and it has been a community game changer. And so having our own hyper-local weather station is fantastic because it helps our community make informed decisions on about what to wear, how to plan for the weather on our campus. We're now using this for mosquito research. And when I wrote that grant a couple years ago, that is one thing I never would have predicted, is that we were going to use our weather station for that. So it is a really versatile tool, and I always share this with my teaching friends, is that WeatherStem is a huge program in Florida. And we have the first station in Michigan, and that's a big point of pride for us. But we're really doing some amazing things with it. And if you really are into finding something cool like this that will, like I say, get science done, this station is a beautiful package. So here's our example, And go ahead, take a look at it if you got some time, and then, you know, maybe check out WeatherStem and get a hold of Mr. Mansour. He's an awesome guy. So it's done wonders for Gibraltar, and it's a really cool thing. So next slide, please. And do you have any questions for me? I ended with a little fun slide. I have a lake sturgeon in my classroom. I'm one of 10 in the state of Michigan that get to raise one. Its name is Jaws. Awesome name. Got my good friends Andy Henry and Brian Campbell in the middle, and we got Kaden on the right. She did cloud research with Mrs. Janney last year as well. We're getting science done. So anybody have any questions?
Hey, and Jeff, thank you so very much. That was awesome. Here's what I'd like you to do. If you'll monitor the chat box, because we want to make sure that we finish up here in just a couple of minutes. If anyone has questions for Mr. Getting Science Done, Jeff Bauman, let him know. I just wanted to throw in a couple of the things that I'm doing with mentoring the kids. As Jeff said, you know, I talked to them, gave them some ideas for some of the things that they might think about doing. We talked about mosquitoes and their life cycle, and then they were the ones that thought, well, you know, we have some precipitation data over the past 2 years that we've collected. We have temperature data. So they're going to go ahead. They've actually looked back for the last 2 years. They're making graphs of their temperature, maximum, minimum, and average temperature, their precipitation data, and they're using this data to help them predict when they think that mosquitoes are going to start to be active. They're also using the Mosquito Habitat Mapper once a week. They're walking around their schoolyard and they're collecting data. They are using the land cover app once a month just to kind of get a feel for how the vegetation and things are changing. They're also learning about what types of mosquito-transmitted diseases are being reported in their state and their county. This is information that's easily available on the public health websites. And so what they're going to do is they're going to be monitoring when active mosquito season starts. They're going to predict when it's going to happen. And they're also going to be leading a prevention campaign at their school, because Jeff mentioned they kind of found out and they're like, whoa, mosquitoes can transmit diseases. But what we want to do is we want to have people feel empowered, not feel scared. There's the chances of us getting bit by a mosquito and getting sick from it are very, very, very infinitesimally small, especially when we take preventative measures. So that's a big part of what they're going to be doing. They're going to show the people in their school community, here's some of the ways in which you can use the Mosquito Habitat Mapper. Here's how you can identify these potential mosquito breeding habitats. And here's how you can eliminate them and also take preventative measures. So we're stoked. I'm excited to be a part of this Getting Science Done. I meet with the kids bi-weekly and then give them some information. I'm using the Google Classroom. And so I'm also happy to serve as a mentor to other school teams that are trying this out, because I know, having been a classroom teacher, that it's by doing that we figure this stuff out and we learn what are some resources and some ways in which we can be most helpful. All right, we're going to finish up with our Cassie taking us on just kind of a quick tour and showing us where you can access some of the resources that we've already developed for you. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. Just a reminder about the Globe Mission Mosquito webpage. I'd like to point out a couple things tonight. The Ask a Scientist blog is up and running, and it's always I'm going to say it, you never know when it's going to come in. We have our welcome message from Dr. Lowe, and tomorrow there's an update to it, but she's got a great message. And it's a place also for you to submit science questions. And if you're not involved in Jeff's classroom and you have a question you want to answer, or even Jeff's kids can ask questions here, but just put your name, your email, and your question, and we'll help get the answer and post it so others can find it also. Back to the Mission Mosquito page. One area that is really starting to grow, and that's our community. And so as you've become a Globe teacher or a citizen scientist and you have your account set up, come to this place, and on yours it would say join community. I already am a member, but join our community. And then what that'll do is put a spot on the map so we know where all of our mission mosquito observers are at. in the discussion forum section, you'll find that there's actually quite a few questions that are being asked. We have some webinar announcements here. Here are the questions that Dorian asked in the first webinar, and the next questions will be posted too. But I've had a few people who have looked at it, not too many people who are taking a stab at making an answer or a contribution to it yet. So I welcome everybody to do that. And I think we made it on time, Dorian.
Woohoo! Well done. All right. Well, we will stick around if anybody has questions. So for everyone who doesn't have questions, thank you so much for making us an hour of your life today. I know how precious time is, and we are just really, really happy to have you be a part of this Globe Mission Mosquito family, because that's really what happens when we have these campaigns. As Jeff will attest to, he was a part of our ENSO campaign for 3 years. We become family. That's why I did reach out to a few of you privately in chat and asked you a little bit about your name and where you're from. I keep records on that in case I didn't have you on my initial list, and I want to stay in touch. So really and truly reach out to me. I would be more than happy, as would the other folks on our team, to assist you and help make your participation in this campaign work really well. So thank all of you. Have a lovely evening. Huge thanks to Jeff. Huge thanks to Mike. Really appreciate it. And like I said, we'll hang on for a few minutes and see if there's any questions.